Hi, I'm going to read a story that I wrote for the Yule gathering in Sydney recently. It's an Australian version of the Taliesin story. Let me tell you a story. You may have heard one similar before, but this is a story that has happened in many lands and at many times and in many ways. Indeed, it is happening right now where you are. But this is how it happened in a place that I was once in. It's the story of the initiation of a bard into the wisdom traditions, through the elements, in a wild chase with the goddess of inspiration. It's a story of awakening, of magic and of rebirth. The goddess of inspiration has been around for a very long time in many places of the world. She's present in the arising of ideas, in insight and wisdom, and has been known by more names and forms than we can possibly imagine. My ancestors named her Cerridwen, but you may know her by another name. But today in this story, I'll name her simply the goddess. She brings us songs, poems, stories, magic, art, and inspires the hearts of all artists and poets. Where this story begins, down the mountain from where I am now, across the plain and through the bushland to the place of tall trees, where the druids often meet today, she went out into the bushland, seeking out the recipe for the brew of Arwen for her son. She had two children, one a girl, bright and beautiful, the other a boy, whose name meant utter darkness, for he was hideous and deformed and ill-tempered. And she hoped that she could give him the gift of Arwen to at least ease some of his suffering. So she travelled through the valley, there, through the forests, over the sandstone boulders, beside the creek and through the trees, where she found the wise ones and the spirits of the land and asked them for their help. And in great kindness and generosity, they passed on the wisdom of the ingredients for the brew, the sacred plants of that sacred place that would help her to brew the sacred Arwen. And these are the 9 sacred plants that they gave her. Banksia, for the wisdom of the elders and the wisdom of laughter. Bottlebrush, for the life force and vital energy. And Gofra, for the wisdom of dreams and the blood mysteries. Bluegum, for higher vision and leadership. G-bung, for fruitfulness and patience. Turpentine, for cleansing, the arts and gentle strength. Xantharia, for resilience and new beginnings. Sheoak, for the voices of the ancestors. And Wattle, for inspiration and the mysteries of rebirth. She collected these sacred plants together, cutting them with reverence and being sure to ask for permission from the spirits of the plant and giving back an offering of water in return. She took them to a small hut that was by the creek, where a large cauldron was placed over a big fire pit. In the corner was a stack of wood ready for the fire. She placed the plant cuttings in her cauldron one by one, along with fresh water from the creek. Now this brew was made of sacred plants of a very particular land, and you will almost certainly find that the Arwen would be brewed quite differently in each and every place. You might have to ask the spirits of the land for yourself to find their advice on how it would be made in the place where you live. And it was no simple task to brew. For the Arwen to form within the brew, it needed to be sowed constantly for a year and a day. And only on the final day would the Arwen come to be within it. For the stirring, the goddess employed a young seeker, who reminds me quite a lot of you, dear listener. And he would stir the cauldron, assisted by an old blind man, for that year and a day. And on the last day, as the Arwen was finally beginning to form, the old man suggested one more piece of wood to the fire. But as the fire roared and heated the cauldron, it bubbled over, and just then those 3 drops of inspiration formed. The cauldron spat and bubbled, and 3 drops sprang out onto the young seeker's hand, burning his thumb. Quickly he brought it to his mouth to stop the burning, but in that moment he also tasted the divine inspiration, the Arwen, and became aware of all that was, all that is, and all that ever will be. It was the inspiration meant for the goddess's son, but he had received it in his stead, instantly knowing all the wisdom of the world, and also realizing that the goddess would now be furious and take chase after him for what he had done. He swiftly shapeshifted into the form of a wallaby and leapt away through the forest, past the grass trees, the ancient blue gums, through the sandstone boulders and into the bracken ferns and bark-strewn brush. But the goddess was quickly at his heels in the form of a golden dingo. Fierce was their chase as they ran through the valley, down the hill, along the creek side. As they ran, the creek widened into a river and led out into the sea. Our seeker went to leap over it, but landed instead in the water and took on the form of a silver brim. He darted away through the waters, but the goddess followed in the form of a huge eel, snapping her sharp teeth at his tail and lashing around in the water. Just as she was about to catch him in her powerful jaws, he jumped from the water into the air, turning into a tiny, brilliant blue fairy wren, almost camouflaged with the sky, small and darting. He hoped he wouldn't be seen. But his hopes were dashed as the goddess leapt from the waters and gave chase as a kookaburra. She laughed as she chased him with full knowing of what was to come, but her laughter was also terrifying and foreboding. They darted through the branches of tall gum trees over the forest here, through the canopy, up into the sky, through the clouds they went, and down back again through the branches of the forest. And there in the forest below he spotted a small pile of leaves and dirt on the floor. He turned himself there into a tiny wattle seed and dropped onto the mound. The goddess descended and rested onto the mound in the form of a lyrebird. With her keen eye she pecked him up from the wattle seeds that lay on the floor, and knew that once again, as she had done in many other lands, in many other ways, that she would give birth to a special child in time. And in that time, as he grew in her womb, she sang him all the songs of the forest, as the lyrebird is the keeper of every song, old and new. And once again, back in her own form, after the time of gestation, the goddess gave birth, and the child was so beautiful and bright that she could not bear to harm him. Instead, she made him a boat of paper bark and sent him down the creek, knowing he would be safe. In time he was found by the people of that place, and it was proclaimed that he was the Taliesin, the one with the shining brow of Arwen and great wisdom. He grew to be a great poet and storyteller, and to sing the songs of the land and of its people with great insight, sensitivity, and inspiration, just as we may make our own connections with the sacred land. What plants are being collected by the goddess where you live? What chase is occurring through your sacred land? What are the songs and the stories being told in the wisdom of Arwen all around you? And will you be the one to taste it?